Your first impression of when you heard that the Nets and Kenny Atkinson had mutually parted ways, McDonough?
Yeah, so I'll go back to last season, guys. Last season, when the Nets got off to a slow start, as you remember, the first couple months of the season, they didn't play very well. I think they lost 6 or 7 games in a row. And there were rumblings at that time that the Nets were thinking about making a coaching change. They did not. They stuck with Kenny Atkinson. The season flipped. They went on a great run after that and obviously ended up winning 42 games and then really pushed Philadelphia in the first round of the playoffs. But those rumors were out there last year from people I talked to around the league. And so there was some tension and friction. And then I think the big shift, obviously, was this offseason, guys. And as you know, the Nets did an unbelievable job, as good as a job of any team in recent NBA history, of building a culture with not a lot of assets. They didn't have high lottery picks. Those went to Boston. They didn't have a ton of financial flexibility. But they drafted well, they developed incredibly well, and they maximized what they had, and that made them an attractive free agent destination for both Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, and unfortunately for Brooklyn, DeAndre Jordan came along with them. So, the thing changed, though. Everything about the culture and an overachieving group of underdogs, that went out the window, and expectations changed. So, did it shock me? No. The timing of it, like you said, Ceruti, did surprise me when, I'm eating breakfast on Saturday morning. So, well, wait a minute. They were up 30 against San Antonio in the first half just last night. But I think it'll be best for everybody, especially Kenny Atkinson, because if I were an executive with a young rebuilding team who is looking to go through a full-blown rebuild that included a player development heavy focus, then Kenny Atkinson is the first guy I would call.
So you weren't thinking, what is Sean Marks doing? Like, why now? Why not at the end of the season? What is the timing of this is a little bit strange, don't you think?
It is, Scal, although reading some of the stuff that's coming out this morning, The Athletic just wrote a long article about some of the behind the scenes, including the game you were at, Scal, last week in Boston when the Nets were getting drilled in the first half, and I guess they had a halftime meeting that got pretty heated. So there was some tension, there was some friction. And look, it's hard enough to coach guys individually in the NBA, and I bring that up because it seems like to some extent, fairly or not, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Jordan, those 3 guys were a package deal, and I don't know if DeAndre's unhappiness with coming off the bench or his role played into it. Kyrie, as Scal knows better than anybody, thinks he's smarter than anybody and should be the coach, the best player, and the MVP. So I think there are a lot of factors here. I think it's very difficult to manage stars in today's NBA, especially veteran stars who have been around with a bunch of different organizations and played for a bunch of different coaches like KD, Kyrie, and DeAndre have. So it surprised me a little bit. The timing did surprise me, Scal. It seems like they would have waited till the end of the year. However, if Kenny Atkinson sensed that his job was tenuous and he was not going to be back next year, I wouldn't blame him at all for going to ownership and Sean Marks in particular and saying, hey, look, why wait? Why prolong the inevitable? If this is best for the organization and you guys are going to do it anyways, we might as well do it now.
Ryan, does this just prove that like culture in general is just total bullshit? Like, does it or not bullshit, but it isn't dictated necessarily from like ownership to the front office. It's basically like, who are your star players? Does this basically prove that? I mean, because it seems like last year everybody loved this Nets team. Everybody loved that they were scrappy, that they didn't necessarily have the most talent. They obviously didn't have a ton of draft picks from the previous few years because of the Boston trade, but they liked them because of the way they played. And a lot of that was due to Kenny Atkinson's style. They bring in the 2 stars, 3 if you want to include DeAndre Jordan, and they're just not the same. And it doesn't seem like, and we could have KD talking about all this stuff about how much he loved the culture there and loved Kenny Atkinson and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's the players that sort of determine what the mood is around the locker room, right? What the team is, what their goals are. As a front office guy, like, do you think Sean Marks at all is looking back and going, man, what the hell did I get myself into?
In the short term, yes. Long term, I don't think so, Ceruti, because you need elite talent to win at the highest levels. And Scal said it for years. I mean, that culture thing is so overrated. Now, the teams that win at the highest levels, they have good culture because their best players, their superstar players, are high character guys, right? And they're all about winning and all about the team. That's why Golden State wins a lot. That's why whoever LeBron plays for wins a lot. That's why other teams with talented guys who are maybe aren't as professional or aren't as team first, they don't win a lot. So at the end of the day, you need talent. I mean, the Nets, the overachieving Nets who, maximized everything they had to get slightly over 500 in the Eastern Conference and lose in the first round of the playoffs, I think that was kind of its peak, Ceruti. That's the challenge with it. There's no next step for however that team is constructed. So you bring in more talented players. You hope it works out. It still very well could work out, but obviously it's not going to be Kenny Atkinson in charge of that group. And, again, the end result didn't surprise me, but I think we all agreed that the timing of it coming on Saturday morning definitely was surprising.
Yeah, I don't get the culture conversation is a weird conversation, but it does seem odd that the two players, if it's them behind it, are not even playing. I understand players that are out there. If I'm Sean Marks and my best players are out there and they're telling me things like, all right, when he ran this play, we should have done this play. On defense, we should have done this instead of this. And that's when the guy is out there, like in the game, in the fight. There was a timeout that this didn't happen. But have you ever heard two players not playing, like being behind a firing of a coach? I don't know if I've ever heard or can think of this actually that this happened.
I haven't, Scal, especially with the team doing relatively well. I mean, I think if you factor in the expectations, they're 29-34. The record's not great, but their best player, Kevin Durant, has played 0 games this year. Their second best player, allegedly, I personally don't think he's their second best player, but Kyrie Irving has the reputation as their second best player. He's played 20 games. So, what were the expectations? And if I were coaching that team, which is I would have started Jared Allen and brought DeAndre Jordan off the bench. So what are the expectations like as far as, doing what's best for the team success? He did that. The team is going to make the playoffs again this year. Obviously, it looks like they'll probably get clobbered in the first round. But, you can say, hey, look, 2 years in a row we've been in the playoffs, and next year we're going to be a lot better with Kyrie and KD. I don't really understand that. One final point on this for me, Ceruti. There were reports that Joe Tsai, the new owner, was going to the players asking them what he thought about Kenny Atkinson. Don't do that, Joe Tsai. If you did that, don't ever do that again, because as soon as you do that, as Scal knows, as soon as you do that, the coach is done. He's done. You can't do that. As an owner, as a front office guy, as soon as you ask the players, and there's a sense that, hey, look, maybe ownership or the front office doesn't fully believe in this coach, then it's over. And so if that were the case, that they might have as well made a coaching change right now, because there's no coming back for that if you're Kenny Atkinson.
I want to play this Kevin Durant sound. This is great, because this was right after, I think this was the introductory press conference that he was talking about, why he wanted to join the Nets, and he had a very interesting answer for what his knowledge of Kenny Atkinson was at the time. So let's take this away and react to it afterwards, guys.
I was doing a lot of YouTube research on like Kenny Atkinson and watching interviews and see how he talked after games and stuff, and I really liked his approach to his craft as a coach, and that's what drew me in pretty quickly. I didn't really do too much research on other coaches, so I guess he always had the leg up. But once I started to get comfortable with how he approaches his craft, it started to make me feel at ease. Even though I never even had a conversation with him, I could just see it through YouTube and through the clips that he was pretty genuine.
So, guys, I mean, I just think it's funny, like, this idea that he's acknowledging that they liked the culture in Brooklyn, that they were happy, to go there because they wanted to, and that he had never even talked to Kenny Atkinson. And you pair that with the fact that Sean Marks reportedly found out that those guys signed via Instagram. Like, we should have known this thing was long ago. We should have known that this thing, like, they clearly, all the stuff about the culture and about wanting to be in Brooklyn, it was all just BS, right? It was all total BS. But I am surprised because, it doesn't seem like Kevin Durant's that kind of guy, right? Where he'd look to get a guy out. I don't know how impressionable he is and whether or not Kyrie's in his ear chirping or other guys, but I don't believe that KD says these things and wants to get a coach out or is a coach killer the way that we call some other guys out around the league. What did you make of that? Because I find that so odd that he would have joined a team and would have never have talked to a head coach, and now you look at it in hindsight and go, yeah, of course this thing didn't work out, right, Ryan?
Yeah, it's today's NBA, Ceruti. It's free agency. It's more about player relationships, especially player-to-player relationships, than it is about anything else. And organizationally, as we've discussed, you have to have stars. You have to have stars in their prime to have a chance to win the championship, especially when the stars are grouping up in LA in particular. You need to be able to combat that. You need to have multiple stars on your roster to overcome that. Now, the challenge and the trade-off is organizationally, you cede a lot of control to the players. And it's always been a players' league, but I think never more so than in 2020 in the player empowerment era. And, there's some collateral damage along the way. I mean, Kenny Atkinson is never going to coach Kevin Durant. He's not going to get one game as a head coach with Kevin Durant on his roster, which is a shame. But that's kind of the deal they make. I mean, to compete at the highest level, you need elite talent. They now have elite talent on paper, but it's sad organizationally, honestly, with the sweat equity that Kenny Atkinson put in. He has a reputation as a grinder. I know some guys in the front office in Brooklyn and also on the coaching staff, and they talk about how hard Kenny works. He's notorious for going to the office and running on the treadmill after games, for watching film late at night. And, all that work, I think, showed through the rebuild and showed through the excellent player development they had. Unfortunately, it seems to some extent, KD, Kyrie, and DeAndre, those three in particular, maybe didn't fully appreciate or didn't think that Kenny Atkinson was good enough for whatever reason, and now he's looking for a new job, which I think he'll get pretty quickly, given the incredible job he did in Brooklyn.